'Tis I, your old pal King Chuck. Happy Sunday fun day to you. Oh man, what a nice day out. The sun's shining. Of course, a couple of days ago we had a lot of really terrible thunder showers that came through, and of course south of us we had several tornadoes. 4 people killed in those tornadoes, including a 12-year-old boy who was killed in the town of Union City. Of course, another casualty, of course, was the Menard store in Three Rivers. That was destroyed by the tornado. The roof was ripped off. One of the walls caved in. But of course, the good news with Menards is that they can go ahead and buy their own building materials and then submit the receipts back to corporate and get 11% off. So that's good news with Menards. They'll be saving big money plus the insurance money, of course. Yeah, it's funny when a hardware store burns down and it's like, yeah, well, we can rebuild with our own stuff. Anyway, so yes, it's a nice sunshiny day. My executive producer slash dog, we're both walking down the parking. So Mike could be in, hoping that my dog doesn't bark at the other day. She did earlier. So if I wait for a second, my apologies. But anyway, so we're several months away from the elections. As a Republican, not a Republican, but independent, pardon me. And of course, Mike Duggan, he does these minimum commercials where he brags about his record in rebuilding Detroit. And you see, this is what happens when you try to do a podcast from a dog park. So Mike Duggan is trying to run, he's running for governor of Michigan. He's trying to work on his record, and a lot of people love Duggan because he helped rebuild Detroit. It worked, it's less of a slum these days and more of a lot of these old buildings were rebuilt and things are hunky-dory now. So that's nice and all, but you got to remember who is funding the Duggan campaign. And unfortunately, it's the Republicans. And the reason why is because they know that when you got 2 people leaning to the left going up against one person to the right, well, the right winger will win. But here's the thing. I am the one commercials I'm really fed up with. The one candidate I think we're all tired of. Perry Johnson. The red-headed asshole who's going around and telling everyone 47. Yes, I'm going to cut out all the wasteful spending in Lansing, and I'm going to turn Michigan into what Trump is doing. And what is Trump doing? Well, drive around Grand Rapids. Gas is now $3.69 a gallon at most places. $3.69 a gallon. It went up to $3.39. Now it's $3.69. Speculation has it that's going to be $4 a gallon by next week. And yeah, peacetime president, my ass. We are wasting And already several people have died because of this bullshit that Trump started. Because, he is, he has that little boy mentality. He wants to take over the world. He says that he wants to get rid of all these terrible leaders and make Christianity the world's religion. And yet, you look at Islam, they force women to cover up. And you look at the Christians, and, they tried to censor Howard Stern. They tried to censor, they're trying to censor pornography, up until the 80s. Any grocery store could sell Playboy magazine. That kind of came to an end in the 80s because of the religious right trying to tell you and me how to worship their God. And it's bullshit. It's bullshit and a half is what it is. Yeah, it's all about my God is better than your God. Fuck you. And yet the sad truth about Trump is that here he is preaching Christian morals, and yet he's got none. He has always lived in exorbitant wealth. He's never known how it felt like in his life to be poor because he grew up in a wealthy family. The only good news is he is slowing down. His health is taking a turn for the worse. He's got sores all throughout his body. This guy is falling apart before our own eyes, mentally and physically. And I know even his fellow people are saying 25, as in the 25th Amendment, because that's the one thing that could save America. Even though J.D. Vance would make a horrible president too. But as long as this country is going to shit in a half, that's what people need to do in November. Vote. And vote in the primaries too. The reason why the Democrats keep losing is because the only Democrats that want to run are the corporate ones who make a lot of money. And basically they're Republican light. And we can't have that, folks. And the question is, it's like, why do we keep seeing these stupid ads on TV for these two candidates? When are we going to start seeing the other candidates and what they have to say? And of course, in one of the ads, Perry Johnson bitched about John James being a, quote, two-time loser. Dude, in 2022, you ran for governor. You spent countless dollars on campaign ads, jammed up our ass. And, some of the ads all look the same. Yeah, it's those ads that show him just, strutting down a factory at these empty machinery, empty machines. Yeah, and of course, one of the ads, the only words he says is perfection. I wish he would people will start realizing, here's the thing. Donald Trump has already endorsed John James. And John James, to me, is this big fat black guy who unfortunately is nothing more than a puppet for Donald Trump. He is a Uncle Tom, if you will. He was a two-time loser. He ran for Congress. He lost. And, of course, he lost, he was helping to run that stupid health department bullshit over in Ottawa County. That was all created because of that one nasty old Polish bitch who ran that restaurant and kept it open during COVID. She didn't give a shit about the health of her people. When will people learn? COVID wasn't a hoax. It was real. And our country was the worst country on earth when it dealt with, in dealing with COVID, because we had a foolish president. Why did he get reelected? We'll never know. But anyway, the one thing I'm pissed off about is, and I mentioned this the other day, Terry DeBoer, former weather girl at Wood TV8. She spent 30 years at Wood TV8. Before that, she had a brief time at Channel 3, WWMT, CBS out of Kalamazoo. Wood TV8, of course, is the NBC affiliate in Grand Rapids. She spent 30 years there, and then she retired briefly. She joined a financial services firm called Jacobs. They do a shit ton of advertising on TV in West Michigan. Jacobs, and then she decided to go back into television, but Fox 17. And she was there for maybe a year, maybe. And now she's retiring again. She said, well, I want to spend time with my grandkids. But now here's the truth. She's running for Congress, going up against Hillary Scalton in the local congressional district here in Grand Rapids. And of course, Hillary Scalton is a centralist Democrat. While the other Congress people were bringing Epstein victims to the the recent State of the Union, Hillary brought some healthcare executive to that same State of the Union. It was a woman who worked for a company called Catherine's Health Services. And I guess there's supposed to be a low-cost healthcare system in Grand Rapids that's like Christ-centered or something like that. Or Catholic-centered, because Hillary is a very devout Christian. But anyway, the sad truth, folks, is that but anyway, what's going on is that even though Hillary is a moderate Democrat, moderate centrist, whatever, I would vote for her over Terry DeBoer. And my theory is that Terry is getting a lot of her money, her financing, from the DeVos family. And the reason why is because way back in 2006, when Dick DeVos was running for governor, and thankfully he lost because he ran on a lot of George W. Bush's platforms, like tax cuts for the wealthy and all that. Dick DeVos, and not to mention the fact that Dick's wife, of course, is Betsy DeVos, and Betsy's brother was in Blackwater, Eric Prince, was heavily involved in the Iraq War. And of course, let's not forget that the DeVos and Prince families paid a lot of money for years and years to this asshole from Fremont. There we go. Bill Johnson, the American Decency Association. They wanted Howard Stern off the air. And what's funny was that when, just a week before KLQ signed out for good, the whole radio cluster was having an Amway appreciation week when Amway turned 50 years old. And the reality is, folks, is that Dick DeVos and Amway, they pretty much own this city. And, they're building a new soccer stadium. I I simply want nothing to do with that family. I try my best to stay away from anything with the word DeVos attached to it. Even though just recently I went to the 9 Inch Nails concert at Van Andel Arena. And of course, it's like, that's pretty much the only place right now in town where you can watch a concert. That in 20 Monroe, and of course there's DeVos Place, which does concerts too. So anyway, the rest of the story is that, so the story was with Terry DeBoer was that in 2006 she held a fundraiser at an expensive fundraiser at her home, where you had to pay a couple $100 a plate, and the money went to Dick DeVos and his run for governor. And anyway, so Terry DeBoer released a statement this week on her website. And the statement was that she wants to return West Michigan to its conservative roots. So the reason why Hillary Scalton's our congresswoman serving Grand Rapids is because once upon a time, this district also had some very conservative parts of the area. And thankfully, due to gerrymandering. And so the gerrymandering was reduced by a vote. And what happened was the gerrymandering. So now this area is heavily Democrat, and deservingly so. But now Terry DeBoer wants to use her celebrity because she thinks that she's the greatest weather woman in the history of Grand Rapids. No, she wasn't. That's Ellen Baca, first and foremost. The story is that she basically wants to return West Michigan to the bad old days. Because when I was young, when I first came here to Grand Rapids, and there were no other jobs than the one that I got, I had to deal with my Hollander boss's bullshit. I had to deal with his bullying, his excuses, his gaslighting. And he did all that to make us feel that we were not worthy of a raise. And if you try to fight for a raise, you're going to get fired in the end. Because people did that. I had a coworker who actually came up to my boss and said, "You don't care about us, don't you?" And she got fired. Well, she didn't care because, she was 62 years old. She was going to retire anyway. The point is that that's the problem with West Michigan, is that there's too many of these types of people. Too many people who love to gaslight and hurt you, all because God is on their side, at least in their mind. And it creates an unhealthy stigma about Christianity. That, God loves me, but not you. And because of that, I try to stay away from church. It's Sunday morning, and I'm not sitting in a pew watching some preacher scream and yell into a microphone. Or in a lot of what mega churches do, they have these seats that you get, collapsible seats or whatever they are. I'm walking my dog in the park, and my dog just, there's a Canadian goose across the field, and I don't know if my dog, she's walking, we got a little baseball field that I'm walking by. She's getting her sniffs in. I'd rather be doing that than to be sitting in a church, And, you got to remember something about Dick DeVos. We can't have nice things because of people like the DeVos family. Let's remember something. It was 20 years ago this year. There was a woman named Judy Rose. She was the president of the Black Hills Community Association here in Grand Rapids, Black Hills is a really bad neighborhood. And Judy Rose started this organization because she was one of the holders out of the olden days of this neighborhood. You know, kind of like Clint Eastwood's character from Gran Torino. And what happened was, you know, the whole neighborhood got black, and she and her husband wanted to stay, and basically she tried to use her religion to get her way. And one of the things so this is what happened. Down the street from where she lived, a strip club called Showgirl Galleria opened. Now, in 2006, in the state of Michigan, the laws have since changed. You could not have a full strip club that served alcohol. So a lot of these strip club operators, they, you know, including Deja Vu, they fought this law by creating a two clubs in one atmosphere. One side of the club is fully nude, and you can't serve alcohol. But the other side of the club, you could serve alcohol, but you gotta be topless and no contact lap dances. So that's what happened. Well, this nasty, horrible, excuse of a human being took the club to court. And by the way, Showgirl Galleria was owned by the same man who owned Sensation Showgirls over by Eastbrook Mall, or the Shops at Center Point, if you will, where there's Best Buy and where the Orbit Room used to be. That's where it was. So anyway, you know, that was a topless club. So this is what happened. She cried to the city that this club is a disgrace to our town. It needs to be closed. So this is what happened. The city told Judy, you need to raise $80,000 to challenge this law. And she had an angel donor who remained anonymous. She got the money. She took the city to court. They did their investigations, and she won. And even worse, two of the city commissioners that signed this into law were George Hartwell, the mayor, and Rosalind Bliss, who became the mayor of Grand Rapids. So the clubs threatened to sue. You know, they went ahead and sued the city. They went to several judges, and they said, well, the cities are allowed to create their own laws about, what's that term called? Local laws. They could create their own stuff. And because of this, the clubs surrendered. And there is a hunch that Dick DeVos was the angel donor because Judy Rose appeared in one of his campaign ads. So, and you know, the sad truth is Grand Rapids is a very sad town, in my opinion, where, you know, I've done everything I could to meet women. You know, I went to bars, I even went to church. And it's like, I had to leave those environments because it was all about, what can you do for me? And of course, like I said, I'm not a heavy drinker, you know. I mean, I think the last time I drank anything was I drank eggnog during the holidays, and that's it. I'm not, and that's the problem with Grand Rapids. It's Beer City, USA. And basically, to be somebody, you either gotta be a drunk, which I'm not, or ultra religious, which I'm not. And, you know, I've told you a million times about my experiences with churches and the fact that a lot of preachers out there are predators. You know, they rape children, they steal money, and they use God as their crutch, basically. You know, the best luck I've had is online dating, obviously, and, you know, I haven't been on a date in 2 years. So anyway, you see, I told you the sad story about my childhood. I had a crappy childhood because I lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere. People made fun of me for being autistic. People made fun of me because my dad was a bus driver. People would talk behind my back. And I had no clique. I had nobody to really... And the only people who wanted to hang out with me only wanted to use me. And like I said, my prom date was this fat, ugly bitch who unfortunately was white, pure, absolute white trash. Who wanted to... who dragged me into her church where they talked in tongues and screamed and yelled and hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, I don't do that shit. Anyway... then I went to, so you see, my mom introduced me to this woman. And then, you see, yesterday was the 100th anniversary of my grandfather's birth. My granddad was the first of 7 kids, and then he had 7 kids of his own. But unfortunately, I was an only child. My mom said, nope, no 7 kids out of me. And what's sad was that my granddad was introduced to my grandmother by my grandmother's roommate. Actually, no. My grandmother's roommate was my grandpa's sister. And because of her, my grandparents were married for 50 years. They loved each other. They had a lot in common. I mean, yeah, my grandpa was from Detroit and my grandmother was from Howard City by Grand Rapids. But they loved each other unconditionally. They never had an argument, hardly at all. And yes, they did have their me time. My grandpa went out and golfed, and my grandmother, would take me to the swimming pool at Grand Traverse Resort. And any of her grandkids, for that matter. But here's the thing. Nobody has ever truly introduced me to somebody special. My mom introduced me to that fat bitch because she worked with her stepdad at that white trash machine shop that her in-laws owned. But then I went to tech school after I graduated high school, and guess what? There were some guys there who said, hey, we're going to Deja Vu. Want to come? They were the only girls I was introduced to, on a positive note. And I learned about how much stigma these women face from the religious right and all these people who want you to feel guilty about going there. Like, oh, they're prostitutes. Oh, they hurt communities. Oh, and I'm like, okay. Yes, there is some prostitution at strip clubs. But you know what? I have seen some dancers who have gotten fired for prostitution because they were usually the lowest, most unpopular dancers, and there's a reason. I mean, because they had to sink so low, yeah, they end up begging for money and begging you for a ride home. And I got news for you. In the many years I've been to a strip club, I have never, ever had sex or stalked or any of that shit with one of the dancers. I mean, but I will say this. There was a dancer at Deja Vu a long time ago. And she danced at the one in Kalamazoo, and she was a sweetheart. I loved her. She not only had a beautiful body, but she had a great personality. I always got lap dances from her at this club. And she was kind of like me growing up. She didn't have many friends. She was bullied a lot. And she even admitted that she was on at the time like 24 different medications. And she didn't want to have kids either, and I don't blame her. And, you know, I think about the bad life I had growing up too many times, about the immense bullying I got. And, you know, the fact that even today I don't hang out hardly at all with anybody. I'm mostly a homebody. And I've tried multiple times to get out of my shell, but the people who want to get me out of my shell just want to use me. Mostly for money and rides, and I don't want that. But that's the reality of organized religion. They want you to feel that instead of going to the strip club, they want you to go there. And it's like the last couple of churches I went to in Grand Rapids, it's like one church hardly had any women, period, except for some grandmas and some really old people. And the other church I went to, I was hardly even noticed. You know, it was a kind of a mega church. I'm done with religion, folks. I am done with organized religion because of this. Because I got tired of playing with politics. I got tired of playing with money. It's like, you know, the strip club is my happy spot versus going to a, you know, and it breaks my heart that the last time I went to a strip club last year, it was Odyssey in Kalamazoo, the Odyssey in Muskegon. And there were a couple of girls who had to drive all the way from Grand Rapids because nobody wants to go to the bikini clubs there. They don't make money. People want to see tits, ass, and bush. They don't want to, yeah, if they want to see a bikini, they just go to the beach. It's like bullshit. And Terry DeBoer, unfortunately, is just one of those people who's trying to return Grand Rapids into the Hollander shit that we had to deal with, this town had to deal with for generations. Not only that, you know, like I said, she's a TV weather girl. And she's also a one of those idiots who believes that there's no such thing as global warming or climate change. The thing is that, first of all, if you're a weather person, if you're a weather forecaster on TV, and you believe that there's no such thing as climate change, you should not be a weather forecaster, period. And Terry was one of them. And I'm sad to say another person was the great Bill Steffen. Bill is another climate change denier. Several years ago, this area had an earthquake, you know, just a tiny little earthquake, nothing that destroyed anything. And guess what? Bill Steffen went on the air later that evening on the 6 o'clock news and said, you know, oh, it was not climate related. It had nothing to do with fracking because there's no fracking here in Michigan. Okay. Like I said, we had tornadoes that went, you know, streamed through, you know, deep southern Michigan. 4 people were killed, including a 12-year-old boy. We had a massive tornado that hit Portage near Kalamazoo not too long ago. Up in northern Michigan, a couple of years ago, there was a tornado that decimated the west end of Gaylord, one of the major hubs in northern Michigan. It destroyed the Hobby Lobby. It used to be, by the way, the town Walmart. And last year, right around this time, there was a massive ice storm in northern Michigan, and it destroyed thousands upon thousands of trees, and it destroyed several radio towers. And some of these stations were like 100,000 watt stations. Like Light 96 and 106 KHQ, they lost their towers because of the storm. So, I mean, we can go on and on, but it's true. Climate change is real. And unfortunately, it breaks my heart that we have a president who is anti-science, who goes around and says that Tylenol causes autism. No, it's not true. What proof do you have? Oh yeah, nothing. N-U-T-H-I-N apostrophe, nothing. We are in dangerous times because of the Republicans, folks. Terry DeBoer is one of those people. And, you know, we should not vote for people like her. She doesn't even care about women. The point is, she never knew how it felt to be poor in her fucking life. And meanwhile, people like me, you know, I've told you my life story. I know how it feels to be poor and having to scrape by just to buy groceries. And having to deal with a Dutch Hollander asshole telling me that I'm not good enough for a raise. Yeah. The only good thing I can tell you right now is that I am getting paid a lot more now because my ex-boss was bought out years ago. But my pay still ain't perfect. I could use more money, tell you the truth. And of course, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon because of all the tariffs. And now we're back in another war. Trump does not care about the middle class, folks. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about me. He only cares about the wealthy. And it's sad. And if we elect somebody like Terry DeBoer into politics, guess what she's going to do? She is going to allow Dick DeVos and his family and other right-wingers to stick their hands into her old bony asshole and make her their puppet. Because the only good thing that Terry DeBoer could ever do is predict the weather. And that's it. That's the only good thing. That's the only good thing about her. She was a weather girl. And I know weather girl is a bit of a slur these days for a lot of these TV females. Look, I love Ellen Baca. And I think Ellen was taking the day off on Friday for whatever reason. I don't think Ellen works Fridays anymore. Yeah, they put her on a kind of a weird schedule at Wood TV 8. And she happened to be in that area of Michigan. And what happened was on her phone, on her iPhone, she reported she happened to be in Three Rivers in front of what was left of the Menards. And yeah, the pictures she took were very horrendous. The walls were caved in, and the sign off the front of the building was destroyed. They put on police line tape so nobody could go in and just take whatever they could. But I'm pretty sure they're going to have to rebuild. But I'm glad Ellen did a great job, and so did the other members of Wood TV 8. They had, Blake Harms was there, and Sarah Flynn was there at the studio telling people stay safe and all that. But what really bothers me, I should point this out too, is I've learned the hard way. A lot of TV and radio personalities here in West Michigan, They're mean. They have an attitude problem towards people. And I think I told you this story. Of course, Susan Shaw, she's retiring from Wood TV8 in a few months. I think next month is her final day. Susan got into a huge heated argument with somebody I know personally at her business over the phone. So Susan was way up in Petoskey during the pandemic when Governor Whitmer said nobody goes on vacation due to COVID. She was protecting us. But Susan and her husband, well, they had to go up to Petoskey on vacation because Susan is a self-centered bitch. Susan, on her vacation, called up this business and screamed and yelled at this person I know that she needed freebie after freebie after freebie. She was very mean and very rude. And when the news broke that she was retiring, I smiled from cheek to cheek. I mean, I'm hoping, I do have a hunch, though, that, pretty soon, of course, the parent company of Wood TV8, which, of course, is Nexstar. Nexstar, they're trying to buy out Tegna. Tegna owns Channel 13. And Tegna, their story is they own WZZM 13. I predict that WZZM 13 will close for good. And especially their news department. And maybe they're gonna get Juliet Dragus to co-anchor the 6 and 11 for all I know. I don't know. But it also depends on how long she has left until she retires, because Juliet's kind of up there in age too. And unfortunately, she's not, Susan Shaw's not the only one. Years ago, speaking of Wood TV8, I used to be friends on Facebook with Laura Velasquez. Laura was one of the hottest women on TV. I loved her. She was cute. And one day, out of the blue for April Fool's Day, I made a joke about her on Facebook. I made a fake report that she was going to pose nude for Playboy as a hottest TV Weather Girls issue. And she unfriended me and blocked me. Laura, I was crushed to the point where I didn't even want to see her anymore. And I know she was married and all that, but it kind of shows the type of the personality she was. That she had no sense of humor at all. So let me explain this to you. But karma did hit her. After Wood TV8, she moved to Denver. She went to the Fox station there. And then she went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, wherever she went to, and worked for a company called AccuWeather. And AccuWeather, so this is what happened. Shortly after AccuWeather, she went back to Grand Rapids, but now she was at Fox 17, the same station Terry DeBoer ended up. And I often joke that Fox 17 is now the TV station where Wood TV8 anchors' careers go to die. So this is the story. It turns out that Laura Velasquez was fired from AccuWeather because she had an attitude problem, and she also didn't perform very well. So they let her go. And as a result, Laura ended up suing AccuWeather for a breach of contract. And then after, so this is what happened. For unknown reasons, I'm guessing it had to do with money, Laura left Fox 17 and the weather business to become a graphic designer. And that's what she does now. She works for some company that, unfortunately, that does graphic design, I guess, and web page design. I don't know. But she's decided, that she wants to work in a business that doesn't involve people, apparently. And I'm like, good for her. The world needs less idiots in the world of broadcasting. And unfortunately, it's just sad that, you look up to these people, but then they look down on you. And of course, in Terry DeBoer's case, she's telling her viewers, her longtime viewers, I don't give a fuck about you. The only people I care about are my wealthy friends. And it's the same with other personalities in West Michigan, whether it's Bill Simonson and, that big fat douchebag, Bill Simonson. I am so happy 98.7 flipped to, that sports station from Detroit, 97.1. I've heard from so many people online who have said that, they would rather listen to 97.1 out of Detroit than to listen to that big fat loser Bill Simonson, because that's who Bill is. He is a big fat disgusting human being, and just adds on to the heavy list of people who in West Michigan broadcasting who are just total egomaniacal losers. And of course, let's not forget Tyrone Bynum. Well, normally at this time I'd be in my car. It's Sunday. It's let's check on 1680 day. Well, my dog is we are actually kind of in the middle of we're by the woods, and she is getting her sniffs in. She's trying to hunt down squirrel and other animals, so we're actually kind of away from my radio right now, but 1680 is still static because Tyrone is too cheap to keep that station on the air. And as I've said multiple times, under federal law, if 1680 is off the air, 102.5 has to be off the air too. But 102.5 is on the air. And Tyrone doesn't want to spend a dime keeping that, 1680 on the air. Because he is a cheap mother effer. He is a cheap mofo. And it shows. And it shows by the type of advertisers who advertise on his show. Ugh. But that's what it is, folks. When you're a TV celebrity, TV or radio celebrity, and you look down on people, I mean, you get hurt. You seriously get hurt. And, it will have an effect on ratings. And I'm wondering if Wood TV 8 is making Susan Shaw quit because of the alleged attitude problem that they heard about. Who knows? Maybe it's also because of money. But, I'd imagine that Susan's in her 60s. And, she did say that she and her husband bought a new house on the lake shore. And, she wants to spend time with her son and, her mom and all that. But that's the thing. They will come up with some excuse not to, but, there's their reason, but there's the official reason. She's a bitch. But I can talk, there's other personalities in West Michigan I can talk about. But let me check my recorder here. 49 minutes and 23 seconds. Yeah. And it's 12 noon. So I better get going. Because, yeah, I got stuff to do this afternoon. And as a matter of fact, my mom's parrot is, his birthday is this week. I better get to the store and get him a toy. But mark my words, folks. So the other thing I need to add is that's what Republicans like to do. They want to put celebrities because they understand that a lot of celebrities do become Congress people. Have successful careers in politics. Of course, one of them is Ronald Reagan. He was a movie actor in Hollywood, and he was a popular governor in California. And of course, he ended up becoming president of the United States, but a bad one. And up in northern Michigan, first ever news anchor at 9 and 10 back in the 50s, Guy Vanderjagt was his name. He was a congressman, Republican. Jack O'Malley, Republican, and he was a congressman. And of course, I have a hunch too about Jack O'Malley. Ron Jolly is retiring from 580 WTCM pretty soon. I have a hunch that Jack O'Malley will take his spot, because recently they took him off 1310 because 1310 switched to a sports format. So I'm predicting that Jack O'Malley will be on 580 pretty soon, but who knows. And of course, let's not forget Greg McMaster, another TV weather person in northern Michigan, and he was a congressman too. So, but yeah, he was actually kicked. He was voted out of office, and I think and part of the scandal was the fact that even his own mother wouldn't vote for him. Man, I love it. It's like I listen to Midas Touch all the time, and they mentioned that Will Kane, who is a douchebag on Fox Fake News, his mother is actually a huge fan of Midas Touch. And it's like, it's so sad when, the parent actually has a brain, but the kid does not. And I feel so sorry. But I gotta get going. I can blab and blab and blab about Terry DeBoer. Get out and vote, folks. Tell Terry DeBoer and other Republicans, fuck you. Plain and simple. Good day. Good luck. Have a great Sunday, folks. I'll talk to you later.